4 months ago today, my life changed in a pretty drastic and in a pretty scary way. We were in the city visiting my two oldest kids, and we decided it was a beautiful August day to take a walk on the High Line, which is the city park that's up on the old rails, the train rails. And so there we were, and we walked up the 2 flights of steps to go onto the High Line, and when I got to the top of the 2 flights of steps, I could not breathe. In the weeks preceding that, I had had a few bouts of shortness of breath, and I just chalked it up to being a recurrence of asthma that I had as a child. I figured, all right, this will pass. It's just one of those things that goes on. But that day, at that moment, I realized, wait a minute, this is something more. This is something serious. So on the way home from the city, we stopped at my regular doctor, and he immediately figured out that my heart was out of rhythm. So we made an appointment the next day for me to go see a cardiologist, and that's when things got really scary. The cardiologist, after a battery of tests, had figured out that not only was my heart out of rhythm, but my heart had gotten so weak that it was pumping less than 20% of its blood volume. A normal pumping is 60 to 70%. So I was in really bad shape, and I didn't even realize it. And I was very lucky, or shall I say blessed, that I didn't have a stroke or something even worse. Now, I wouldn't be telling you any of this if things hadn't gotten better. So we can rest assured that things are better. But it was a scary thing, to say the least, because of the suddenness and the shock of this. And as you can imagine, I had to go through, over the last 4 months, a whole variety of tests and procedures, including having my heart shocked back into rhythm. And yes, it's just like what you see on TV. Clear, zap, and then you're breathing again and everything's working all right. Fortunately now, my heart's almost back to fully normal. I'm on medication to keep me in rhythm, and they just can't understand it. My heart went out of rhythm, and it was out of rhythm so long that it led to the weakness, but now I'm feeling fine, and everything's good, and it's not something I'm concerned about. But I have to admit to you, when it was going on, this was one of the scariest and one of the most challenging things I faced in my life. I was completely unprepared for this, and I walked around for several weeks afterwards in a daze, and I couldn't concentrate. I went through a variety of emotions in different ways, and I was not only angry, but I was confused about what I figured was the lack of fairness of the whole thing. See, if there's one organ in my body that I've tried to take care of for the majority of my life, it's been my heart. See, in my late teens, I started jogging, not because I like jogging and not because I have a jogger's body, but because I heard it was good for the heart. I eat oatmeal every morning out of a Heart Smart container. And I take fish oil because it's healthy for the heart. So I was just blown away that at 45 years old, I was showing symptoms of heart failure. I just couldn't believe it. Now, I didn't lose my faith, but you can bet I questioned God, and I did some bargaining with God. I'm not afraid to die, but as I looked at my life and having 2 kids that are about to graduate high school, I was like, they can't live without me. I'm not ready for this yet. And for a split second, I did that one thing that I've said over and over again to you guys never to do. Never look at something that's going wrong in your life and try to figure out what you did to cause it. Because you'll always find it. Because we're sinners, we're imperfect, we make mistakes, and if you want to make that connection, you can, even though God is not making that connection. And I just could not believe that finally, after all these years where I feel so blessed and so happy and everything is going so well, how hard I was slammed in the face with my mortality and with the weakness of my own flesh. And it's at that moment, it's at those times where we need the most the foundations of what our faith is all about. Christmas and Easter. And the reason we rehearse it and repeat it and celebrate it over and over again is to have the certainty and the assurance that in the midst of bad times there is always hope. And we come to the manger to always know that God is with us. Now, in the Christmas gospel, and at other times in Jesus' life, Mary plays a vital role that's often understated by the church. After all the fanfare that we hear about with the manger and the shepherds and the angels, finally in the gospel lesson, Luke makes this quiet, simple observation about Mary. But Mary treasured all these words and pondered them in her heart. And that wouldn't be the only time we'll hear Scripture speak to us about the heart of Mary. 40 days later, as Jesus and Mary and Joseph are going out in public for the first time together as a family, they go to the temple for the presentation. And as they go to the temple, Simeon, this faithful servant in the temple, is there. He sees the family. He holds the Christ child. And then he declares that this child is destined for the rising and the falling of many nations. And then he looks at Mary and he says to her, "And a sword will pierce your own heart also." See, Simeon, by some power of the Holy Spirit, was able to see that what Jesus was about and what made him so special wasn't merely just going to be a celebration and a birthday party like Christmas is, but that Jesus was confronting sin and death head on, and he was going to pay the price and the heavy cost for it in order to bring salvation into the world. And he knew, and he said to Mary that she was going to see this. She was going to witness this, and it was going to strike her in the heart. And the church has a very rich tradition in its artwork of depicting Mary with her heart. And oftentimes, there's a sword or a knife that goes along with her heart to remind us and show us that the heart of Mary and what she endured was to point us to the heart of our God and our Creator. Oftentimes in popular culture, we use the word heart to talk about important things with people. My heart is broken. Her heart is full of passion. His heart is all into what he's doing. She's a cold-hearted witch. Right? The question for us tonight as we gather together on Christmas Eve is, what's the condition of your heart? Are there some struggles and burdens that you're bearing that are bearing down on your heart, making it ache? Is your heart broken because of some relationship that's fallen apart? Are you pondering in your heart all these spiritual things, trying to figure out where it all fits in? Are you afraid in your heart? Because of a variety of different reasons, perhaps you're worried about a sword piercing you also. When we boil tonight down to its very basic elements, what the great gift of Christmas is showing us the heart of the God who created us. Christmas is God's gift to us to show us his design. And Christmas shows us that our Creator works in ways that we do not expect, works in ways that go in completely opposite of the way we think they should go. The whole idea and the whole concept that God made his personal presence real to us by coming into the manger as a lowly baby, a feeding trough, goes against all the things that the world holds out as being powerful and strong and that to be followed. Yet that is the exact message that God gives to us, and that's the message that Christmas reminds us of, that God always works in ways that we least expect. And God often works in the smallest and simplest of things to accomplish great blessings and great gifts. God is not the source of the struggles, the pain, the questions, the heartache that we deal with in our lives. But what God does promise is that in the midst of those things, he will always be there for us. He will always work to bring us hope and healing. And what God does for us is exactly the gift that Mary had on that first Christmas. We have the blessing of treasuring and pondering the presence of God in our hearts. And it's at those times in our lives when our hearts are weighed down the heaviest that God comes to us, just as Isaiah the prophet tells us in the Old Testament lesson, with his great zeal and his great love for us, so that we have hope. We love the classic Christmas stories, like A Christmas Carol, right? And it's a story of how love changed the heart of Ebenezer Scrooge. And so many of the other beloved holiday specials we like because they follow that same formula. Whether it's The Grinch or Elf, it's about love changing hearts. It's about love changing lives. See, even the secular movies get it. Christmas is about love. And those secular movies are rooted in what this message and this gift is all about tonight. The love of our God who made us comes to us to always give us that peace and always give us that hope. And in a world where too many hearts are lacking love, that's exactly what we need. It's the heart of God's life-giving love that we see in the manger. It's the heart of God's life-changing love that we see in the cross. And it's the heart of God's life-sustaining hope that we see in the empty tomb. And as we experience that love, God changes, God comforts, and God heals our hearts. Amen.